Today I'm going to be talking about healthy relationships, and specifically the difference between healthy relationships and unhealthy relationships. Respect is key in any relationship, whether it be a romantic relationship, a friendship, or a partnership. And sometimes people confuse respect with other adjectives. So I'm just gonna lay it out for you what respect really is and what respect really means so that you can recognize when you're being given respect, and so you know what to offer other people when you have relationships with them. Listening to each other, valuing what the other person is saying, even when you're not agreeing with it, are all small aspects of respect. Respect is a willingness to show appreciation or consideration in daily life, in a specific situation, just in general. That is literally part of the dictionary definition of what respect is. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Find out what it means to you. Give it to other people, you'll get it in return. Honesty and trust are very important in any kind of relationship. You can't have trust without the honesty first. And sometimes being honest is harder than you might think, and it might be harder for the other person in the relationship with you than you might realize. There's an excellent resource that I was given when I was doing counseling at a domestic violence shelter. And I have shared it with a lot of people who are not in situations of violence or abuse, because it's important to remember in a variety of situations. It's important to remember just for your own life. And it really has a role in friendships, in relationships, in partnerships of any kind. In any kind of relationship that you're going to have, you need to know your Bill of Rights. You have the right to be you. You have the right to put yourself first. You have the right to be safe. You have the right to love and be loved. You have the right to be treated with respect. You have the right to be human, not perfect. You have the right to be angry and protest if you are treated unfairly or abusively by anyone. You have the right to your own privacy. You have the right to your own opinions and to express them, and also to be taken seriously. You have the right to earn and control your own money. You have the right to ask questions about anything that affects you in this life. You have the right to make decisions that affect you. You have the right to grow and change, and that includes changing your mind. You have the right to say no. You have the right to make mistakes. You have the right not to be responsible for other adults' problems. You have the right not to be liked by everyone. You have the right to control your own life and to change it if you're not happy with it the way it is. So that's your Bill of Rights. And it's a great Bill of Rights for every single person on this entire earth, whether you are in a healthy relationship or an unhealthy relationship, because keeping that Bill of Rights in mind and following that Bill of Rights and giving yourself the amount of respect that you want other people to give you will give you a beautiful framework for maintaining a healthy relationship. A healthy relationship is about shared responsibility. So if you are putting all of the work and effort into the relationship and into the daily life and the other person isn't, that's a problem. Same thing if the other person is putting all of the work and effort into daily life or into the relationship and you're not putting forth the same amount of effort. There are going to be times in life and in relationships, especially when people live together, where one person is doing more or being more. And it can ebb and flow, but it can't consistently mean that one person is taking on the burdens of everything else while the other person is sitting idly. When that becomes the regular routine, it becomes problematic, because there is no room for resentment in a healthy relationship, and resentment is what will happen. There is no room for threatening behavior or actions in a healthy relationship. So even if you don't feel that you are unsafe, even if you don't feel that you are being abused, if you feel threatened, if there are times in your relationship when you actually feel threatened by the other person or by something the other person is doing, it's not a healthy relationship. The key is really to know when you are being threatened and when you are actually feeling threatened, and to understand when you're feeling unsafe and to understand when you're feeling not good, because sometimes that not good feeling becomes the norm, and because we're so used to it, we don't even realize that it has become our norm, and we don't realize that there are alternatives. So I'm going to talk about healthy boundaries for a minute. Sometimes boundaries are kind of like morals. We all have our own personal boundaries, and boundaries for one person won't be the same as boundaries for another person. Some boundaries are very clearly stated, and we know what someone's boundaries are. Other times, they're more like a moral code, and you keep it to yourself, and you recognize your own boundaries, and you know what is good and isn't good, and what you will let happen and what you won't let happen, and what feels right and healthy and what doesn't, but you don't necessarily voice those things, or you don't walk around wearing a sign, "These are my boundaries," and have a long list that everyone reads every day. So that's usually where boundaries get tricky, because some are so obvious and others are not. Even though everyone has their own set of personal boundaries, there are usually some red flags that you can look for with yourself or with someone else to know if you have a problem with boundaries or if the other person has problems with boundaries. And this set of facts isn't meant to be judgmental. It's just meant to make you think and open your eyes if you have done or do any of these things on a regular basis, because we only do and pick up on what we're taught, and it's hard for people to realize what good boundaries are if they've never seen them or if they've never been taught them. So if you do notice that you do or have done any of these things, don't berate yourself. Don't think that there's something inherently wrong with you, and don't think that you're a bad person who can never be in a healthy relationship. This is more like a very loose guide to get you thinking and maybe make you see why some of these things were not a practice of good boundaries, so that you can maintain healthy relationships from here on out. And it might be a really good indicator of why some of your relationships didn't work in the past, or why some of your relationships were unhealthy. And again, when I'm talking about unhealthy relationships, I'm not necessarily talking about abusive relationships. However, abusive relationships are also unhealthy. Telling someone everything right off the bat, extremely personal details when you've met them for the first time, is usually not a good idea when we're talking about being safe and having good emotional boundaries and respecting yourself. Similarly, falling in love with a new acquaintance right away. I'm talking you meet someone and an hour later you are telling people that you're already in love with this person. Now, there is definitely mutual attraction that can happen, and certainly you can really, really like someone and enjoy their company right away. You might think to yourself, maybe this person could be my soulmate. Maybe I will marry this person. And those maybes are fun, good questions in which you're really feeling your emotional response. But to honestly feel that you have fallen in love with someone and know that you want to be with them for the rest of your life in a matter of hours or days is usually an indication of poor boundaries. And it's just something to examine. It's just a judgment call. It's not that you don't know your own mind or your own heart. Along those lines, falling in love with the first person who expresses interest, or with every person who expresses interest, can also be a sign of having unclear or poor boundaries. So if you have noticed that you have gotten into relationships with people because they've expressed that they like you, and then automatically you're in a relationship, and then the relationship fails or you break up or whatever happens, and then the very next person that expresses an interest in you, you're automatically in a relationship with them, and that continues as a cycle or as a pattern, it's just an indicator. The universe works in mysterious ways, in different ways, and everyone has different lives. So this, again, is a very loose sort of indicator. But it would be unusual for every single person who expressed an interest in you to be a compatible mate for you and to be someone that you should be in a relationship with. And to some people, they don't see this, and it doesn't seem strange. And again, that's not a judgment against you or against someone who feels that way. It's just that they've never known anything different. So it's a great opportunity to realize that that's not the way that things have to be, and that's not necessarily the most healthy way to proceed with romantic relationships. Another indicator of poor boundaries is if you go against what you really feel or what you really think in order to please the other person. If you really feel strongly about something and just to please them or make them feel better or make them like you more or keep them loving you so that they won't leave you, you do something that you normally wouldn't or that you don't really agree with in your heart of hearts. That's something to think about. And you can think about if you've done that in the past so that you can recognize it and know that it's not something that you want to do in the future. Another boundary indicator might be if you are being more sexual than you truly want to be with your partner or with the person you're in a relationship with. And what I mean by that is if you don't really feel like having sex or doing something sexual and you're doing it anyway to please the other person or to make them feel better or because they're asking you to or because they're telling you you should or, of course, if they're forcing you to do that. But sometimes when we're thinking about boundary issues, it's not necessarily a forceful pushing. It can be something that you're almost working through in your own mind that you want to selflessly do or give to the other person, and maybe they're not even asking you for it, but you're going against what you really want to do simply because you think you should do it or because you want to do something nice for the other person. And as loving as it can sound, if you twist it a certain way, it's still you not being authentic to you. Now, this is a more obscure one, but letting other people define you and letting other people call you things, and I'm not talking about name calling, although name calling could be part of it. Letting other people create your reality, tell you who you are, tell other people who you are, and basically just letting them define you in any number of ways is a boundary problem. And sometimes we let other people do this and we don't even realize that we're letting them do this. Sometimes we don't even realize that they're doing it. We might just take what they say at face value and assume that it's true because they are smarter or wiser or know us very well, so we think they must be right. And this can be a problem because you are letting other people determine either your worth or your importance or just things about you that can go from very simple to very complex without being the one who's defining you. You're letting something else or someone else do that for you. And there's another boundary issue that I want to talk about. I do worry about offending people, but it's important to talk about. The item that I'm thinking of is trying to seek out certain kind of attention so that someone will take care of you. Becoming depressed, falling apart, having something terrible happen with you emotionally or in your life so that the other person can be there for you and take care of you. It is often very, very real that people have issues that cause their life to deteriorate. And it's not fabricated, and it is a mental health reason, and they're not doing it to seek attention. And then other times, they have legitimate issues, and they use them in a way at the same time as them being real. They use them in a way to see if someone else will care about them, or help them, or treat them a certain way, or take care of them, because that act of taking care of someone is an act of love, and they desire that act of love from someone else. And these are all very human traits and emotions. So if you've ever been in this situation, I don't want you to feel bad about yourself. And I don't want you to think that anything that was ever wrong with you in your life when you wished that someone would show you a certain kind of love or care was fabricated and not real. It's just something to be aware of and something to think about. And I think that it would be wrong of me to leave that item out when I'm talking about boundaries. So I hope you're having a wonderful week, and I will see you next time.